In March 2011, the body of 32-year-old Emily Wallace was discovered in her upscale apartment in Arlington, Virginia. What appeared to be a routine investigation quickly spiraled into a web of forbidden romance, political intrigue, and a cover-up that reached the highest levels of government. 6 months earlier, in October 2010, a dangerous relationship between White House Secretary Emily Wallace and Secret Service agent Matthew Kane began to unfold in the halls of power, setting into motion a series of events that would end in her tragic and untimely death. March 6, 2011, dawned cold and unassuming in Arlington, Virginia, the streets bathed in a pale winter sun. The day was quiet, ordinary in every way, until it wasn't. At 10:37 a.m., the Arlington Police Department received a call from a White House staffer concerned after Emily Wallace failed to report for work or answer her phone. Emily's colleagues described her as punctual and dependable, someone who had never missed a day without notice. The call triggered a welfare check at her upscale apartment on Park Boulevard. Officers arrived within minutes, greeted by a building concierge who nervously explained that Emily's apartment had been eerily silent since the evening before. The officer knocked several times, calling out her name, but there was no response. At 10:56 a.m., with mounting concern, they entered the apartment using the building's master key. The interior was immaculate, almost unnervingly so, a reflection of Emily's well-organized life. Her living room was tastefully decorated in neutral tones, with a minimalist touch that hinted at her perfectionist tendencies. A faint floral scent lingered in the air, suggesting a recently lit candle. At first glance, everything seemed normal. The curtains were drawn just enough to let in a soft stream of natural light, and a half-empty wine glass sat on the coffee table, alongside a neatly stacked pile of documents. But then, they saw her. Emily's body lay crumpled near the coffee table, her head at an unnatural angle, her auburn hair matted with blood. The carpet beneath her was soaked in deep crimson, stark against its beige color. Her throat bore the unmistakable marks of strangulation, and her pale, lifeless eyes stared blankly into the distance. The sight sent a shiver through the officers, seasoned as they were. By 11:15 a.m., the scene was secured and detectives arrived. Among them was Detective Caroline Miles, a veteran investigator known for her meticulous attention to detail. She surveyed the room with a heavy heart, noting the unsettling stillness. The crime scene lacked the chaos typical of a burglary or random act of violence. Nothing was out of place, no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no scattered belongings. It was almost as if the perpetrator had been careful, deliberate. As forensics combed through the apartment, it quickly became evident this was no ordinary crime. The half-empty wine glass bore no fingerprints, not even Emily's. Her phone was missing, an unusual detail, considering her laptop remained untouched on the dining table. The team worked in silence, the gravity of the scene weighing heavily on them. At 1:42 p.m., a crucial discovery was made. Beneath the couch, barely visible to the naked eye, a small object glinted in the light. It was retrieved carefully, an official Secret Service badge, torn and worn around the edges, as if it had been hastily discarded or dropped. The badge carried no name, only a serial number. When the information was run through the database, The results sent shock waves through the team. The badge was registered to Special Agent Matthew Kane, a high-ranking member of the Presidential Protection Division. Detective Miles felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had heard of Kane, a decorated agent with an impeccable track record, a man who had dedicated his life to safeguarding the nation's highest office. His name was synonymous with loyalty and professionalism. The idea that someone of his stature could be connected to such a gruesome scene seemed unthinkable, but the evidence demanded attention. By 5:30 p.m., Miles and her team pieced together more fragments of Emily's life. A quiet, reserved woman in her early 30s, Emily was a rising star within the White House staff. Her colleagues described her as intelligent, ambitious, and fiercely private. Yet there were whispers, vague hints of a relationship that went beyond the professional. Some mentioned that Emily had recently seemed distracted, her once sharp focus faltering, her late nights at the office growing more frequent. As investigators delved deeper, it became clear that Emily's life was not as simple as it appeared. Phone records revealed an unusual pattern of late-night calls and encrypted messages traced back to a secure line registered under the Secret Service. While the messages themselves couldn't be accessed, the number was unmistakably linked to Matthew Kane. By the morning of March 7, 2011, word of Emily's death reached the higher echelons of government. A routine welfare check had spiraled into a potential national scandal. The discovery of Kane's badge at the scene added fuel to the fire. Kane was immediately summoned for questioning, and while he appeared calm, his responses raised more questions than answers. He admitted to knowing Emily but denied any romantic involvement. When pressed about the badge, he claimed it had gone missing weeks prior, though there were no records of him reporting it as lost. By March 8, 2011, the investigation into Emily's murder was no longer confined to the Arlington Police Department. Federal agencies became involved, their presence a stark reminder of the stakes. The media, though initially unaware of the incident, began to circle. Whispers of an unusual death reaching the ears of prominent reporters. The scene was now one of controlled chaos, the pristine walls of Emily's apartment bearing witness to the unfolding storm. Every detail seemed to deepen the mystery. The lack of defensive wounds on Emily's body, the erased fingerprints on the wine glass, and, most damningly, the badge that placed a trusted agent squarely in the orbit of suspicion. Though Emily Wallace was gone, the tangled threads of her life and the secrets she carried were only beginning to unravel. Emily Wallace had always been a figure of quiet strength in the chaotic corridors of power in Washington. Her early rise from small-town Indiana to the prestigious role of White House secretary was no accident. She had worked tirelessly, driven by a mix of ambition and an innate ability to manage crises, with a calm demeanor that won her respect across the board. But by October 2010, cracks in her polished exterior began to show, though only those closest to her noticed. Emily had been receiving unsettling, anonymous notes for weeks. They started as vague jabs, simple phrases written in block letters like, "Be careful who you trust," but quickly escalated to far more personal and sinister threats. By the end of the month, the notes included alarming hints about her secret affair with Special Agent Matthew Kane. One particularly chilling message, left in her office drawer at 7:30 p.m. on a quiet Friday, read, "You're playing with fire, it will burn." Emily, always cautious about her private life, shredded the notes after showing them to Matthew. She tried to convince herself they were mere pranks, jealous colleagues perhaps, or petty office politics, but deep down she was unnerved. The precision of the threats suggested someone was watching far closer than she could have imagined. Matthew Kane's response to the notes was pragmatic but troubled. He had spent years navigating danger and secrecy, first in war zones, then as a protector of the most powerful individuals in the country. The notes, while disturbing, seemed manageable to him. But Kane was unaware of how much Emily had been internalizing the fear. By mid-November, her normally composed demeanor had grown more anxious. She began avoiding eye contact during meetings, and her once effortless multitasking was faltering. Co-workers chalked it up to burnout, but Matthew saw the truth. Emily was unraveling, and so, in many ways, was he. Their relationship had grown increasingly intense since it turned physical in late 2010. What had begun as comforting companionship morphed into a deep and consuming connection. They met in quiet corners of the West Wing, spoke in whispered tones during late-night phone calls, and shared fleeting moments of intimacy whenever their schedules allowed. Matthew found himself both exhilarated and terrified by the affair. He had built a career on control and order, but Emily was the one thing in his life that defied those boundaries. He knew it was reckless. He could lose his job, his reputation, his family, but walking away felt impossible. By December 2010, the tension reached a breaking point. Emily confided in one of her closest friends at the White House, someone she believed she could trust. This act, though innocent in her mind, would later prove devastating. Not long after, the shadowy figure first appeared. One cold and snowy evening, Emily left work later than usual. Surveillance footage from her building's lobby at 9:47 p.m. showed her entering with her coat pulled tightly around her. A figure trailed her from a distance, their features obscured by a hooded jacket. Though Emily made it to her apartment safely, she noticed something was off. She told Matthew about the incident the next day, her voice trembling as she recounted the feeling of being watched. Kane, alarmed, offered to handle the situation discreetly, perhaps involve trusted colleagues or set up surveillance. But Emily refused. She feared exposure more than anything else, even her own safety. She assured him it was a one-time incident, but both knew better. The weeks leading up to March 2011 were marked by mounting paranoia. Emily stopped taking her usual walking routes, avoided lingering in public areas, and spent more nights at home with the curtains drawn. Her phone records showed a spike in late-night calls to Matthew, most lasting less than 2 minutes, quick check-ins, whispered assurances. Kane, too, was unraveling. The strain of keeping their affair hidden, while maintaining his high-stakes job, was taking its toll. On March 5th, Emily and Kane arranged to meet in Georgetown, far from prying eyes. The cafe was small and dimly lit, perfect for discretion. Witnesses later described Emily as visibly agitated, her hands trembling as she clutched a coffee cup she never sipped from. She leaned in close, her voice low but intense, as though trying to convey urgency without drawing attention. Kane, on the other hand, appeared tense but composed. He left abruptly after about 30 minutes, his expression grim. Emily remained behind, her posture slumped, and her gaze distant. She left shortly after 10 p.m., disappearing into the cold night. That night, neighbors in Emily's building reported hearing muffled sounds of a commotion coming from her apartment around 11:15 p.m. A faint thud, like furniture being overturned, followed by silence. No one called the police. After all, noises were common in apartment living, and Emily was known to live alone. By the morning of March 6th, Emily Wallace was dead. When detectives entered her apartment, they immediately noted inconsistencies. Her cell phone had been submerged in the bathroom sink, its data wiped clean. The half-empty wine glass on the coffee table bore no fingerprints, and the building's surveillance footage from March 5th to March 6th was mysteriously missing. As investigators pieced together the timeline, one thing became clear. Emily had been terrified in the days leading up to her death, and someone had gone to great lengths to ensure the truth stayed buried. Kane, now a figure of suspicion, would soon find himself at the center of a storm neither he nor Emily could have anticipated. By March 10, 2011, the investigation into Emily Wallace's murder had spiraled far beyond the confines of a simple crime scene inquiry. Special Agent Matthew Kane, once a decorated protector of the nation's highest office, was now at the center of a mounting storm. His once sterling reputation was tarnished by the discovery of a hidden burner phone in his suburban Virginia home. During a warranted search earlier that morning, investigators were stunned by what they found on the device: a trail of messages exchanged between Kane and Emily in the weeks before her death. The texts were not just personal, they hinted at fear, secrecy, and escalating danger. For detectives, the messages painted an incomplete but damning picture of a relationship under siege. Emily's words carried undertones of desperation, and her growing paranoia was evident in her frequent pleas for guidance and protection. Kane's responses, though more guarded, hinted at his own unease, with cryptic mentions of someone getting too close and warnings for Emily to be careful. Despite the mounting evidence, something unprecedented occurred by 4 p.m. that same day. Federal officials intervened, and the investigation was abruptly halted. Detectives were informed by anonymous higher-ups that the case had been classified as a matter of national security. Files were seized, and communication regarding the investigation was restricted. Kane, instead of being charged or detained, was reassigned to a remote field office in Alaska. The abruptness of these actions left investigators stunned, and rumors of a cover-up began to spread like wildfire. Within hours, news outlets started to pick up whispers of the classified case. Journalists with ties to the White House noticed Kane's sudden reassignment, linking it to Emily's murder. Behind closed doors, federal officials scrambled to contain the story. In the halls of power, the mood was one of quiet panic. High-ranking officials feared the potential fallout if details of the affair and what Emily may have discovered became public knowledge. By March 15, 2011, a whistleblower stepped forward, detonating the first public bombshell. Through an anonymous email sent to several major news outlets, critical documents were leaked. The files, though redacted, included damning evidence of Kane's affair with Emily and a covert operation involving classified surveillance programs. At the heart of the leak was an allegation that Emily had stumbled upon encrypted files detailing illegal activities within the administration, activities tied to unauthorized domestic spying on prominent political figures. The leaked documents suggested that Emily had not just been a secretary, but an unwitting witness to dangerous secrets. According to the whistleblower's claims, Emily had accessed a misfiled document during a routine administrative task in early February 2011. The contents of the file, described in vague but chilling terms, revealed the existence of a clandestine surveillance operation targeting both allies and enemies of the administration. The file's metadata suggested it had been concealed in a high-security system, and Emily's access was purely accidental. Yet, the moment she opened it, she became a liability. The leaked information sparked a media frenzy. Major outlets dissected the implications of the whistleblower's claims. Public trust in the administration began to falter as questions about Emily's murder grew louder. Was her death truly a crime of passion? Or was it something more sinister? A calculated hit to silence her before she could expose what she had seen. By April 2011, the fallout had reached a boiling point. Cain was officially charged, not with murder, but with obstruction of justice. Federal prosecutors accused him of tampering with evidence in Emily's case and withholding critical information about her final days. Cain maintained his innocence, vehemently denying any involvement in her death. His defense team, led by a high-profile attorney, painted a very different picture. They argued that Cain was a scapegoat in a politically motivated cover-up orchestrated to protect high-ranking officials from scandal. The trial was a spectacle, drawing intense media attention. Every seat in the courtroom was filled with journalists, political analysts, and even former colleagues of Cain, vying for a front-row view of the unfolding drama. The prosecution presented the burner phone messages as evidence, emphasizing Cain's connection to Emily and his failure to report her increasing paranoia to authorities. They argued that Cain had prioritized his affair over his duty, complicating the investigation and obstructing justice. The defense countered with its own narrative. Cain's lawyer pointed to the classified nature of the case, accusing the government of withholding key evidence that could exonerate his client. They argued that Cain's reassignment was not an admission of guilt, but a deliberate move to distance him from a politically explosive situation. Most importantly, they claimed that Emily's murder was not about Cain at all, but about the secrets she had uncovered. The trial reached its breaking point in June 2011, when a former intelligence operative testifying under subpoena dropped a shocking revelation. According to the operative, Emily's death was not a crime of passion, but a sanctioned hit, carried out by a covert unit tasked with neutralizing insider threats to national security. The operative described the existence of a shadowy protocol known as Operation Silent Guard, designed to eliminate individuals deemed too dangerous to the administration. Emily, the operative claimed, became a target the moment she accessed the encrypted file. The courtroom descended into chaos as the testimony unfolded. Journalists scrambled to document every word, while spectators whispered in disbelief. The revelation forced the trial to pivot dramatically. Cain's defense team seized the opportunity, arguing that their client had been set up to deflect attention from the real culprits, the architects of Operation Silent Guard. As the trial concluded, the public was left grappling with a sobering truth. Emily Wallace's death was no ordinary murder, but a consequence of secrets so dangerous that even the nation's most trusted institutions would resort to extreme measures to keep them buried. Though Kane was acquitted of the murder charge, his reputation was irreparably damaged. The trial raised more questions than it answered, leaving a trail of uncertainty and suspicion that would linger for years. The revelations of June 2011 marked the climax of a story that began with an affair and ended with the exposure of a conspiracy. Emily's murder became a symbol of the lengths to which power will go to protect itself, even at the cost of innocent lives. The years that followed the trial of Matthew Kane were quiet on the surface, but the echoes of the scandal lingered in the corridors of power and the minds of the public. By 2015, the case of Emily Wallace's murder had become one of the most enigmatic and controversial stories in recent history. Officially, Kane had been acquitted of her murder, but the questions surrounding her death refused to fade. The government's refusal to declassify key evidence only fueled conspiracy theories, and Kane, once a respected agent, became a ghost of his former self. After his acquittal in June 2011, Kane disappeared from the public eye. He moved to a remote town in Alaska, far from the relentless scrutiny of Washington. His once pristine career and decorated reputation were irreparably tarnished, and he lived a life of quiet exile. Locals in the small Alaskan community rarely saw him. Those who did described a man who seemed haunted, his sharp eyes now dulled by a weariness that came from carrying the weight of suspicion and betrayal. The solitude suited him, or perhaps it was simply all he had left. Despite his physical isolation, Kane's name remained a symbol of scandal. Speculation about his involvement in Emily's death never ceased. Some believed he was innocent, a scapegoat caught in a web of political intrigue. Others were convinced he had been complicit in a cover-up, if not the act itself. The truth, buried under layers of classified documents and sealed testimonies, remained maddeningly out of reach. For Emily's family, closure was an elusive dream. Her parents, both retired schoolteachers from Indiana, retreated into their grief. They refused to speak to reporters, their quiet Midwest home becoming a sanctuary from the media frenzy that never truly ended. Emily's younger sister, Claire, became an outspoken advocate for government transparency. By 2014, she had published a book detailing the inconsistencies in the investigation, the political interference, and the emotional toll the case had taken on her family. The book reignited public interest in the case, sparking debates about accountability at the highest levels of government. In Washington, the whispers surrounding Emily's death never truly faded. Every few years, new rumors would surface, fragments of leaked memos, hints of undisclosed evidence, or anonymous claims from former insiders. By 2013, several high-profile journalists had attempted to piece together the story, but each investigation hit the same roadblock: classified files and gag orders. The secrecy only deepened suspicions that the truth was far darker than anyone dared to imagine. One particularly chilling detail emerged in 2014 when an investigative journalist uncovered the existence of a mysterious file labeled Operation Silent Guard in an archived intelligence database. The file, which was heavily redacted, seemed to confirm the testimony from Kane's trial. A covert program targeting individuals deemed threats to national security. While no direct connection to Emily was ever established, the timing of her death and her accidental discovery of classified documents suggested she had been caught in the program's crosshairs. By 2015, Kane had become a recluse, living in a small cabin surrounded by the rugged Alaskan wilderness. He rarely spoke to anyone, avoiding the internet and living off the grid. Yet, those who managed to speak with him described a man still searching for answers. Kane was adamant about his innocence in Emily's murder, but he carried the burden of guilt for their affair and the danger it had brought into her life. He once confided to a local that he often dreamed of Emily, not the vibrant, ambitious woman he had known, but the lifeless body he had seen in crime scene photos during his trial. In the years following the trial, conspiracy theorists latched onto the case, weaving elaborate narratives that ranged from plausible to outlandish. Some claimed that Emily's death had been a coordinated hit ordered by high-ranking officials to protect illegal surveillance programs. Others suggested that she had been silenced after uncovering a blackmail scheme involving prominent politicians. One theory even speculated that her death was a personal vendetta carried out by someone within the White House. Each theory only added layers to the mystery, ensuring that the case stayed alive in the public imagination. In the end, Emily Wallace became more than a victim of murder. She became a symbol of unanswered questions, buried secrets, and the cost of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her story, like her life, remains unfinished, locked away in the shadows of classified files, leaving the world to wonder, how far will power go to bury its secrets? Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss our daily updates. If you found this case shocking, check out Racist Husband's Secret Affair with Black Neighbor Ends Deadly, an unbelievable story you won't want to miss. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.